بدنا فين التصور اللي تصورنا؟ طلعنا عدورنا ضمننا من ما تصورنا هون.
Try to imagine yourself living in these tents, not for a day, not for a week, not for a month, not for a year. Suppose you imagine yourself that all your life you are going to stay in this tent. Believe me, you will make a gorilla. You will go and fight. Fight for your land. Fight for your home. Fight for your country.
We wait and wait for a long time. From 48 till now. Waiting for the United Nations. But nothing had been done. Except more refugees. So, we think that the only way is to carry our arms and to fight. We were obliged to fight. We don't like war, but the person who had been kicked out from his homes is obliged, and he has the right to fight. To fight for living, to fight for his future, for his children, for his people. And this is what we are doing.
We are not fighting the Jewish people. There were always Jews in Palestine before the Zionists came. We were friends. It was the movement of the Zionists that wanted all our land and wanted to drive us out.
Political Zionism began in Europe in 1897. Its aim was the creation of a Jewish national state. At the first Zionist Congress in 1897, Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, called for Jewish colonization of Palestine. Of the Palestinian Arabs, who were 90% or more of the population, Herzl said,
"We shall try to spirit the penniless population across the border by procuring employment for it in transit countries, while denying it any employment in our own country."
Herzl approached European rulers with his plan for expanded Jewish settlement in Palestine. To the Tsar's government in Russia, Herzl said that his program would help undermine the growing socialist revolutionary movement. To the German Kaiser, Herzl presented it as fitting in with the German imperial ambitions in Asia Minor. And to the Ottoman Sultan, he said that Zionist settlers would help him maintain his authority over the Arab population of Palestine. It was during World War I that Zionism found a willing partner in England in its aim to colonize Palestine. Chaim Weizmann, the leader of the Zionist movement in 1914 and a future leader of the State of Israel, wrote,
"We can reasonably say that should Palestine fall within the British sphere of influence, and should Britain encourage Jewish settlement there as a British dependency, we could have in 20 to 30 years 1 million Jews out there, perhaps more. They would develop the country, bring back civilization to it, and form a very effective guard to the Suez Canal."
In 1915, the British High Commissioner in the Middle East, Sir Henry McMahon, declared,
"Great Britain is prepared to recognize and support the independence of the Arabs in all regions within the limits demanded by the Sharif of Mecca."
With this promise that England would help the Arab peoples gain their independence, the Arabs rose in revolt against the Ottoman Turks, who had ruled over the Middle East for over 400 years. But the British had no intention of helping the Arabs of Palestine gain their independence. In 1916, they concluded the treacherous Sykes-Picot Treaty with the French, carving up the Middle East between the two imperialist powers and eventually placing Palestine under British control. On November 2nd, 1917, the 20-year Zionist effort to colonize Palestine was crowned with success. The British Foreign Secretary, Lord Arthur Balfour, issued the famous Balfour Declaration.
"Dear Lord Rothschild, His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Yours sincerely, Arthur James Balfour."
Faced with the reality of British colonization and increased Zionist immigration, the Palestinian people rose in revolt to protest these imperialist schemes on their homeland.
For 20 years, we demonstrated and fought against the British and the Zionists. The British sent in 6 different commissions to investigate our demands. Each time, they reported that the cause of our outrage was Zionist immigration to our land. These commissions didn't mean a thing. The official policy of the British was to help the Zionists. Year after year, their immigration increased. Finally, in 1936, we, the Palestinian people, began our revolution. We organized a general strike all over Palestine. It lasted for 6 months, the longest strike in the history of the Arab world. For 3 years, we fought a war of resistance. We liberated much of Palestine from the British. The Zionists would not have been able to hold out on their own. The British had to send in 100,000 men, a third of their army, to crush our heroic resistance. They trained the Zionists and gave them arms. They hunted our people down with dogs in the night. At the end of the fighting, the Zionists had a well-trained army, but we were forbidden to own even a single cartridge.
May 1939. With war clouds looming over Europe, the British tried to appease the Palestinians by limiting Jewish immigration to Palestine. The Zionists opposed this policy, and 1 week later, the Zionist secret defense forces, the Haganah, the Irgun, and the Stern Gang, began a campaign of terror against the British and against the Palestinians. The Zionists could no longer rely on the British to sponsor their state. Ben-Gurion wrote,
For my part, I had no doubt that the center of gravity of our political efforts had shifted from Great Britain to America, who was making sure of being the world's leading power, and where the greatest number of Jews, as well as the most influential, were to be found.
September 1st, 1939. War was declared between Britain and Germany. The Zionists asked to take part in the war effort, but they opposed the formation of a joint Palestinian brigade of Jews and Arabs. They insisted on an all-Jewish brigade, which could become the nucleus of an army to fight for the creation of a Zionist state.
The First World War brought us the Balfour Declaration. The second ought to bring us the Jewish state.
Das keinen Mut, die mehr zu zwingen vermag, dann wird unser Wille und unser deutscher Stahl auf die Not meistern. Deutschland, sieg heil!
In Europe, smoldering Nazi anti-Semitism broke loose in a vicious attack on the Jewish people. In 1938, more than 20,000 Jewish people were arrested in Germany. Thousands of shops were looted. Hundreds of synagogues and apartment houses were burned. Jewish people were barred from crafts and trades, their children barred from German schools. The Jews were forced to wear a badge of identification, the yellow star.
It was in those days a fact of everyday life that only the Zionists had a chance of negotiating with the Nazis. But they didn't think in terms of fighting anti-Semitism. Their first priority was always the building of a Zionist state in Palestine. The rest of us thought that we should fight anti-Semitism. In 1933, 6 years before the Nazis forced us to wear the yellow star, the Zionists encouraged us to wear it. Wear it with pride was their slogan. And in some places, selling yellow stars became a business. There were plain ones and fancy plastic ones.
The Nazi government and the Jewish Agency for Palestine concluded an agreement under which Zionist-selected Jews were permitted to emigrate to Palestine. Adolf Eichmann's Central Bureau was originally designed for Jewish emigration. For those well-to-do Jews who would pay for his services, Eichmann would sweep aside the red tape, issue passports, and provide passage to Palestine through private transport agents. It was a lucrative business for the Gestapo.
In 1938, 2 Zionist emissaries, Pino Ginsberg and Bar Gilad, came to Nazi Germany. These men did not come to save us. That was not their job. They were looking for young men and women to colonize Palestine and fight for a Zionist state. The Gestapo allowed them to stay. For these men, there was no red tape. They were allowed to set up special training camps for the selected few who would make the illegal run to Palestine through the British blockade.
Why, you ask? The Gestapo saw 3 possible benefits from this cooperation. It would satisfy Hitler's mania for getting rid of us. It would embarrass the British in Palestine and create difficulties between the British, the Zionists, and the Palestinians.
The Nazis dropped this emigration policy in 1939, but the Jewish organizations remained the very cornerstone of the Nazis' Jewish policy. Most of the leading positions in the Nazi-appointed Jewish central organizations were held by Zionists. In Amsterdam, Berlin, Warsaw, and Budapest, Zionist officials could be trusted to compile the list of persons and their property. They prepared the lists of deportees. They organized forced labor gangs and a Jewish police force to round up the victims. Leo Beck, chief rabbi of Berlin, thought Jewish policemen would be more gentle and make the ordeal easier on us. In the spring of 1944, Zionist Rudolf Kästner headed the Relief and Rescue Committee for all of Hungary. Rudolf Kästner, with the full power of the Jewish Agency behind him, withheld from the 800,000 Hungarian Jews the knowledge that they were being shipped to the gas chambers in Auschwitz. Kastner and his cronies told our people they were being shipped to a new town called Land of Bread. We paid the price for this collaboration. All the governments of the world were silent, including the Zionist officials in Palestine. Rescuing us was not their priority. Yitzhak Greenbaum, head of the Jewish Agency Rescue Committee, declared,
"If I am asked, could you give from United Jewish Appeal monies to rescue Jews? I say no, and I say again no. In my opinion, we have to resist that wave which puts Zionist activities in the second line." Not all Jews followed the policy of collaboration. In the Warsaw Ghetto, thousands of Jewish men and women died resisting the Nazis. Jewish fighters worked in the underground to help their sisters and brothers escape the Nazi terror.
At the end of the war, thousands of Jewish people waited in the displaced persons camps of Europe. In the fall of 1947, more than 55,000 applications for admission to the United States had been filed. A majority of these people said they wanted to go anywhere but Palestine. The Zionists wanted us in Palestine because increased immigration could mean the establishment of the Zionist state. The Yiddish Bulletin reported in 1950.
By pressing for an exodus of Jews from Europe, by insisting that Jewish displaced persons do not wish to go to any country outside of Israel, by not participating in the negotiations on behalf of the displaced persons. By all this, the Zionists certainly did not help to open the gates of America for Jews. In fact, they sacrificed the interests of living people, their brothers and sisters who went through a world of pain, to the politics of their own movement.
We will proceed the roll call.
Australia, yes. Belgium.
In November
Yes.
1947,
Bolivia.
the Jewish
Yes.
Agency for Palestine accepted a
Brazil.
partition plan from the United
Yes.
Nations calling for the
Russia.
establishment of a Jewish state. The plan gave 56% of the land to the immigrant Zionists. At the time, they owned only 6% of the land. This policy echoed the words of Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism.
We will demand the land we need. The more immigrants, the more land.
The Palestinians greeted the plan with a general strike throughout Palestine. David Ben-Gurion declared,
From the beginning of April, the war of independence passed from the defensive to the offensive.
of 13 military operations during this period, 8 took place outside the territory allotted by the original partition plan. Palestinians from Tiberias, Haifa, Safad, and Baisan were forced to flee. During this time, the Zionists used 2 military strategies. Plan C aimed to unleash terror tactics in the cities and villages of Palestine. Plan D was an all-out offensive to drive the Palestinian Arabs off their land and out of Palestine. Partition was not enough for the Zionists. At Deir Yassin, 254 Palestinian men, women, and children were butchered in cold blood. Menachem Begin, commander of the Irgun, said,
Our men captured the village of Deir Yassin. They were compelled to fight for every house to overcome the enemy. They used large numbers of hand grenades. The civilians who disregarded our warning suffered inevitable casualties. The massacre was not only justified, but there would have been no state of Israel without the victory at Deir Yassin.
May 14, 1948, 1 month after the massacre at Deir Yassin, Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the new state of Israel. 10 minutes later, President Truman released the following statement.
This government has been informed that a Jewish state has been proclaimed in Palestine. The United States recognizes the provisional government as the de facto authority of the new state of Israel.
Neighboring Arab armies, led by King Abdullah of Jordan, entered the territory outlined as Arab Palestine, but Abdullah had no intention of protecting the Palestinian people. His plan was to add the west bank of the Jordan River to his own kingdom. The Zionists used this action as an excuse for further expansion into Arab Palestine. David Ben-Gurion declared,
"We are not obliged to state the limits of our own state. The Arabs are making war on us. Why tie ourselves down?"
The United States speedily approved a $100 million loan to Israel. Lewis Johnson, Secretary of Defense, said,
"Israel is important strategically, and we must support her."
Secretary Johnson did not mention that 1 million homeless Palestinians were forced to seek refuge in the border areas of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. They left behind 388 villages, half the buildings in Palestine, 30,000 acres of citrus groves, and thousands of shops and businesses. Israel had created a nation of refugees.
We were living in very bad conditions after the Exodus in 1948. There was not
Ben-Gurion told the Israeli Congress,
"You have brought us back to the place where the law was given and where we were commanded to be a chosen people."
On the first day of the Sinai invasion, Israeli border police proclaimed a curfew in the city of Kfar Qasim. Unaware of this curfew, the villagers returning from work in the fields were shot down by the Israeli police. An Israeli court found 7 of the policemen guilty of having killed 43 men, women, and children deliberately. The leader of the massacre was fined 1 Israeli penny.
On January 1st,
while Diane was still in Vietnam, the U.S. announced the sale of Skyhawk attack bombers to Israel. The New York Times reported this was the first time that the U.S. had introduced a strictly offensive weapon into the Middle East. Now Diane was ready to make the Palestinians and the Arab countries pay his price. On June 5, 1967, Israeli bombers appeared in the skies over Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, launching the Six-Day War.
The Israeli bombs fell on our houses. Our people were shot on the roads. Mothers were separated from their children. We were forced to live in tents in the rain and cold. The Zionists expelled us from our country. Women were left without fathers, husbands, brothers or sons. We bring up our children until they are big, and they come and massacre them on the roads.
Zionist propaganda portrayed Israel as an innocent, struggling nation on the verge of destruction by hostile Arab neighbors. Later, Israeli General Peled admitted that the claim that Israel was under the menace of destruction was a bluff. What were the real reasons for this Zionist war of expansion? 95,000 Israeli workers were unemployed. There were many strikes. For the first time in Israel's history, more people were leaving than immigrating. The economy was in trouble. But if Israel could conquer the oil reserves of the Sinai, then according to Israeli General Herzog, Israel could become self-sufficient in the world's most important commodity, oil. A U.S. State Department official declared,
"In the Far East, we can get almost no one to help us in Vietnam. Here the Israelis won the war single-handedly, taking us off the hook and serving our interests as well as theirs.
As a result of their military victory in June, the Israelis occupied Gaza, the West Bank of the River Jordan, Jerusalem with its $70 million annual tourist industry, the Sinai with its $60 million annual oil production, and the Golan Heights, part of Syria. Once again, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced to live under Zionist occupation.
This is a Palestinian packing plant in the occupied Gaza Strip. Palestinians do the work. These oranges are grown on Palestinian farms, but they are exported to the world as an Israeli product. For every expression of resistance against the Zionist occupation, our people faced collective punishment.
Israeli soldiers on reprisal operations would use a can of black paint to put a circle with an X in the middle on every third or fourth shop door. No official explanation was given.
In front of the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, 2 Arab residential sections were destroyed to make way for a parking lot. At the end of 1967, the New York Times reported that the Israeli army bulldozed 800 houses in the Jordan Valley, dynamited 850, rendering 20,000 more Palestinians homeless. An American journalist reported,
"We know a group of people in Amman who are refugees from a village called Yallo on the West Bank. At dawn, they were awakened by soldiers pounding on their doors. They pounded on the doors. They made all of the people come out of their houses exactly as they had slept. They made them leave without taking anything with them. They weren't permitted to feed their children, and they were told to walk in a certain direction down the road. And then the army began dynamiting their homes behind them, even as they went. This is not even the end of the story, but these people, as they traveled down the road, were harassed by the soldiers who selected men at random and murdered them before the eyes of the others."
Why does Israel deal so brutally with the Palestinians? Why such harsh treatment? Perhaps Moshe Dayan has the answer.
I am against the integration of a large number of Arabs. I think a solution should be found that would not leave too big an Arab minority within our frontiers.
Was our first fixed base. From Karami, we launched many raids into occupied Palestine. The Zionists intended to eliminate us completely, but after the Battle of Karami in March 1968, the Palestinian people knew that we could fight. The Zionists attacked Karami with almost 10,000 men. We were 450. We fought for 15 hours. Their tanks ran out of gas. We blocked all the roads. They had many wounded, and finally they retreated.
Well, this is a turning point in the history of guerrilla, in the history of Al-Fatah revolutionaries. A turning point in the history of the Arab nation.
This is the first confrontation battle we did and we win.
After the battle, all the Palestinians heard about Karami and thousands wanted to join the movement and fight to return to Palestine.
And what did you do before you joined Al-Fatah?
I have been working as a clerk in a machine company, electric machine company.
And why did you join Al-Fatah so late?
Because I want to do my best to fight the Israeli army to get back my country, Palestine country.
How many years do you think you will have to fight?
It doesn't matter. 3, 4, 5, 10. If I did, my children will be big and he will find instead of.
We organized a workers' militia.
Revolution change. In spite of all our hardships, we keep our Palestinian culture alive.
Against the Jews. We do not want to push the Jews into the sea or any silly thing like that. We also do not want the Zionists to push us into the desert. That is why we must...
Number 17, units of the Royal Jordanian Army surrounded all refugee camps in and around the capital of Amman. The army began shelling the camps at 5 a.m. Thousands of innocent people are injured as a result of heavy artillery and phosphorus grenades. There are many reports of the wounded being dragged from clinics and being tortured by Hussein's mercenaries. The army does not permit any of the world's press to report the atrocities. Many journalists have been fired at to hide the crimes of Hussein's troops. This is the real Rogers peace plan.
All over Jordan, our militia and commandos fought heroically against Hussein's mercenaries. We defended the revolution against great odds.
The Pentagon is prepared to send in American troops to save Hussein's regime. At U.S. bases in Turkey, Greece, and West Germany, U.S. forces are mobilized to intervene on Hussein's behalf. In the Mediterranean, the U.S. 6th Fleet is cruising off the coast of Lebanon and is ready to support Hussein. At the Pentagon, Deputy Secretary of Defense Packard announced this morning that the U.S. government would make certain that Hussein continues to have a military capability. This announcement was followed by a $70 million military defense package given.
سلبني آخر شبر من ترابي ربما تطعم للسجن شبابي ربما تسطو على ميراث جدي من أثاث وأواني وخوابي ربما تحرق أشعاري وكتبي ربما تطعم لحمي للكلاب ربما يغطي قريتنا كابوس رعب يا عدو الشمس لكن لن أساوم ولآخر نبض في عروقي سأقاوم